Mount St. Helens is a name you've likely heard before, even if you aren't a geologist or volcanologist. That's because it was the site of the largest volcanic eruption in US history. But what exactly happened that day? And what has happened in the 43 years since? Has the landscape recovered from the desolation of the great fire-breathing mountain? To fully answer that question, we need to first understand a little bit about how volcanoes work. Because Mount St. Helens is a volcano. Obviously. You see, hundreds of thousands of years ago, there sat an empty, nondescript, flat swath of land. It was not until 300,000 years ago that the Juan de Fuca plate met with the North American plate. When these two collided, the heavier oceanic rocks of the Juan de Fuca plate subducted underneath the North American plate. Kind of like this, but they weren't books, they were giant. Anyway, look, if this is confusing to you, I highly recommend that you Google plate tectonics so that you can get a clear understanding of this situation. All you really need to know is that the plate underneath, right here, the Juan de Fuca plate, basically got so hot that the rocks became some melted molten magma. Try saying that 3 times fast. Melted molten magma, melted molten magma. And this magma fought its way to the surface and came out in certain key locations known as volcanoes, one of which is present-day Mount St. Helens. But this isn't its only name. Well before European settlers came in, messed everyone up, and stole this land. Hey, that unfortunately did happen. Let's not pretend like it didn't. The Klickitat Native Americans, who had lived beside the volcano for several thousand years and knew all too well of its destructive power, referred to it in fear and awe as Tahone Letklap, Fire Mountain. I'd hope I said that even close to right. They still hold on to that name to this day, just as there are other tribes who hold their own names for it. It wasn't until British explorer George Vancouver, who might sound familiar as the namesake for both Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, as well as Vancouver, Oregon, USA, came to Tahone Letklap and quote-unquote discovered it, that it received the name Mount St. Helens, after his good friend and diplomat, Baron St. Helens. I'm convinced that every single historical person looks exactly the same. As time went on, Western settlers from the burgeoning nation of the United States came to settle in the regions near the volcano. Many people built vacation homes and summer resorts, and many logging operations spawned in the area. A common historical trend, Americans ignored the wisdom and knowledge of the peoples who came before, and are still here to this day, and ignored the potential dangers of such an active volcano. Foreshadowing. Began to notice a strange growth forming on the side of the mountain. Hey, that looks pretty dangerous. You should probably evacuate. Fine, I've lived here for so long. I'm not concerned. The sun rose like any other day. Birds were chirping, flowers were blooming. All was at peace. Suddenly, there was a deep rumbling felt as an earthquake resulting from pent-up pressure in the volcano, and moments later, the entire peak and northern slope of Mount St. Helens violently erupted and began careening down into the valley below with a sound of 163 decibels and a force that blew windows out up to 200 miles away in Seattle. Approximately 10 million trees were felled by the blast. That's slightly more subscribers than I have. Slightly. The mountain used to look like this, and suddenly it got a complete makeover and became like this. All that material flew down into the valley in the largest landslide in recorded history. 43 years after the historical eruption of Mount St. Helens that literally shook the world, I decided to head there myself to see firsthand the aftermath of that devastating event, as well as discover what progress the landscape had made in the decades following in reestablishing itself. So we're just crossing over the bridge right now that designates the western edge of the blast zone, so we're finally going to be getting into the area that was devastated and directly affected from the eruption itself. Holy sh! Oh my god, this is insane. Already, we can plainly see how far the process of regrowth has come. This process is known by a specific name: secondary succession. To better understand this, let's look at a quick example. When the first Hawaiian island emerged from beneath the waves, it was nothing more than a barren rock. Slowly, over time, seeds arrived, carried on the backs of birds and by the tide. These seeds began to grow and colonize the island. This process is known as primary succession. Primary succession occurs where there is no previously existing life. As you might imagine, animals then move in, and it becomes a healthy ecosystem. Now let's say that this Hawaiian island, being, much like St. Helens, a volcano, is rocked by a volcanic eruption. A large portion of the ecosystem is damaged or destroyed by this ecological disaster. It takes time for it to regrow and reestablish itself after this disturbance. The process of doing so is known as secondary succession. As you have probably guessed, this is because the succession is occurring in an ecosystem where there are previously existing plants and animals. But it needs time to heal and reestablish itself once again on top of that. Now let's jump back to Mount St. Helens. Obviously, the disturbance here was the aforementioned 1980 volcanic eruption a mere 43 years ago. That is not a lot of time on an ecological timescale. However, we can plainly see that much secondary succession has already taken place. Trees and shrubs are small and new and don't blanket the land as they once did, granted, but the region is healing at a very solid rate. The road at this location is closed in the winter anyway, every time. However, they had this giant landslide near the Johnston Observatory, which has made it closed for basically all of this year. But we're gonna walk past it a bit to get to a bit closer into the blast zone and see some more of the devastation as well as the recovery in action. I think the biggest problem with Washington State is that the weather is so dang unpredictable. Every time I go outside and I don't think I need my sunglasses, that's every time I need them. Rain 2 seconds ago suddenly got sun directly in my eyes. Where the sun's out here, Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens over there is completely covered up. I just realized that I'm walking on the side of the road like an idiot because the road is closed. There's not gonna be any cars coming. Now that's more like it. Seems like a storm's starting to blow in. Hoping my 2 jackets are enough. The growth is incredibly impressive after 43 years in this area, and this entire river was knocked out, and that's why it's this braided stream where you have like river, and over that ridge it would just be river, all coming together. You could see it a little bit more down over here. So all of the sediment things you can see inside of this river used to be on Mount St. Helens. Classic Washington State weather. I've now removed my jackets because I started sweating. Got a few miles up the road now. Still nothing crazy, but the effects are definitely becoming more noticeable. If you look over here, you can see the trees are definitely smaller. Currently coming up on 3,000 feet. Oh yeah, now this is crazy. So you can see here, this isn't that river valley, the mountain coming down into the river. This mountain of sediment here, that is from Mount St. Helens. This all came off the mountain when it exploded, rushed down all the river valleys, congregated, and looks like the river must have torn through this area largely, carrying and depositing the sediment upon the side. This is now the new river channel, which as you get farther down splits off, and for all I know there could be another channel beyond this ridge here, I'm not sure. A lot of things talked about 150 feet of sediment. This is obviously not that tall, but this is a lot of sediment. It just has a small amount of succession on top of it. A thin layer of mosses and grasses and trees. That's probably the coolest thing that we've seen so far. It's a baby tree! Look at him! Oh, this guy. Actually not as soft as I expected. Not sure what he is. Comment below if you know what type of tree that is, besides like conifer or spruce. This terrain actually reminds me a lot of the Scottish Highlands. Ah, no, we got a stop sign up ahead. Man, this is really gonna cut into my time. Okay, I'm curious if this is the landslide debris flow that could have closed down the Johnston Visitor Center. It seems likely, given that you could see the road that used to come through here has been obviously annihilated and used to connect over there. This is really, really cool. You get a much better view of that like sedimentary plain that's been carried down that I was talking about earlier. Bullshit. Oh yeah. Oh shit. I'm pretty sure that's an elk. Yeah, I think that's an elk. You could, oh yeah, you could see the horns. I might need to like zoom and enhance that a little bit, but that's definitely an elk. Holy shit, massive. Look at that. It's so big. Tim Tiger Wildlife Safari, Mount St. Helens edition. Hopefully we don't get any more crazy wildlife. Hint, hint, I don't want to see the bear. Honestly, I thought this was bear claw marks for a second, but then I saw how high up it goes, and I don't think a bear is that tall. You know what, though? These are a little bit suspicious of markings. You know, if I get mauled, I get mauled. It's kind of just like that sometimes. This road never ends. I came from that road down there is where I came from. I get in a really good view of those mountains that I was walking beside, and you can really see a lot of the devastation on them now. These used to be just like covered in green pine trees. Now, very brown, barren. I did not notice a lot of the sort of like barren pieces to this wasteland because I was closer to the river. And you could see a lot more vegetation by the river. Now, as you move higher up, it's not necessarily the case. You could see a lot of these trees and everything that are just starting to come up, and they're pretty spread out. Certainly has a long way to go, but it is going that direction. Something really interesting I've noticed here. I could see these downed trees here that must have gotten knocked over from the blast and then burned to a crisp. However, none of the trees in the area are like that, or if they are, they've been removed. But at least you can look below and see that's not really the case. What's interesting about that is that this ridgeline here, I believe, must have blocked that from basically receiving the searing heat wave down below there. You could see where the blocking would have happened right there. Side note about the elk here, since we have my elk friend somewhere back up there. The elk in this park is one of those situations where there's a lot of elk, which sounds like a good thing, but it's actually not, because there's too many elk. And they're basically dying off, and they're not at a stable point because there's far too many of them, not enough resources to go around, etc., etc. Holy shit. This is fascinating because you can really see where the road was right there, where it's been chunked out from all the way up here. Yo, do you see how high up we are? Holy shit. So now we're really seeing, as we get closer to the mountain, and a little bit higher up in altitude, this is clearly a zone of secondary succession. Trees are relatively small, verging on very, very small. Bushes, shrubs, not many grasses and things. You can see a lot of the dead stumps that previously were in this area. And now everything is coming back anew. A lot has happened, but there's still a lot more to go. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mount St. Helens. It's quite a bit windier up here. Jeez. The mountain would be over there ordinarily. All jokes aside, we're really getting to see something really interesting and cool now. So right behind me, even though you can't see it, is Mount St. Helens. You can see this area where it's deposited a lot of the sediment when the mountain blew, knocking forth literally the side of the mountain itself down the river valley, shooting out that way. And those green areas you can see is where the secondary succession is occurring. You can see everything coming back to life on top of everything. And behind me here, these trees got knocked over by the blast wave and burned to a crisp. If you can imagine this entire hillside, as well as basically everything for miles and miles that wasn't just straight up burned to a crisp, this is where you could see that classic example of something that was eradicated by a very violent volcanic explosion. So now you can see where I drove into. The road ended about here, and then I had to walk all the way, the rest of this way, up to Lowett Viewpoint, right here. So what I'm looking out over, here's Mount St. Helens. This obviously used to be just one peak. This entire area here got blown off and sent down this valley. That's what I'm looking over right now. And that's why I could see the 150 feet of sediment, rock, debris, everything that's just covered this entire area and completely reshaped it, making way for that secondary succession. Now, as cool as this area is, and as much as I'd love to stay here and explore all day, you can't tell there's violent gusts of wind and rain coming in. It is 3:30, which means the sun is going to be setting very soon. It'll get dark far quicker than that, given all the rain clouds and everything. So I'm gonna make the intelligent adventure decision and head home right now before something bad happens to me. I'm gonna say a quick goodbye to Mount St. Helens. Dang. We're gonna rush on home. Oh, wait, you see that? You see that? That giant elk? Oh my God. Oh, he's looking at me.
3 hours later.
Oh my God. Holy crap. Oh my God. I am soaking wet. I don't know if you could probably tell. Jacket, shirt, just soaking wet. Holy crap. You could hear it, I'm sure. It started pouring rain toward the end there, which was super cool, but I am literally soaked to the bone. Sopping wet. My car's gonna be disgusting. I can barely even function. I sprinted like the whole 6.5 miles down. I stopped briefly to look at an elk one time, maybe like a half stretch or something. I am just holy crap. Whew! Wow. All right, let's go home.